Having said that, I invite my panelists for the eSports panel to join me on the stage. And I'm happy to introduce to you Cédric Schlosser to my left. Cédric, he's a board member of the Swiss eSports Federation, definitely an eSports aficionado, and founder of eSports teams such as Mind Sanity 10 years ago. And he built a very, very successful StarCraft 2 team. Today runs a company that is the first eSports agency in Switzerland. Then we have Lyubomira Petrova to my right. Lyubomira has been the Chief Marketing Officer at UltraPlay for several years now, and as such, she's also in charge of branding and key messaging to the diverse audiences that UltraPlay has. And finally, Oleg Profatylo, to my very left, he's the Chief Strategy Officer at the marketing agency Digital Choo. He has more than 10 years experience in development and implementation of international projects. So I'm very pleased to have you here on the panel today. Oleg, of course we're going to take a heavy focus, yes please, heavy focus on marketing issues for obvious reasons with your company. So can you share your thoughts on, let's say, key marketing aspects that you feel that matter a great deal as this industry moves forward? For instance, teams and tournaments, what's the best way to capitalize on esports fans?
First of all, I would like to say that despite the fact that esports in detail greatly differs from, I don't know, classical sports, but on the top level, you may think of it as a classical sports sponsorship. So, of course, there are teams, there are tournaments, there are, I know, broadcasts, and of course, there are opinion leaders. So all of these, I know, this may feel similar to any marketing team. And the first approach is also quite similar. So first hand is of course the teams, but they do differ somehow from the any other sports team because they also are the top opinion leaders for the esports community. So whether your brand will be on their jersey does not always depend on the money which you are willing to spend on that sponsorship. It also depends on the fact whether this team will accept your brand. Will they feel that it fits to their ecosystem? Will they feel that your brand may provide something more, something to develop the esports community? So you have to make sure that you give all your effort to do that. Well, in terms of maybe sponsorship of the tournaments, so I really don't think that this is a matter for brands that are just starting to enter the esports category, because first you must feel your audience, you must think of what to say to them, test your creative materials, and try to be as close to their interests as you can. And only then you can go up to something as high as the tournaments, because tournaments are really the points where you gather the maximal audience, maximal viewership, and maximal interests to your brand.
Thank you very much, Oleg. Lyubomira, so your company serves as B2B and provides a software solution for esports betting. Can you share your thoughts from this perspective, please? How has esports grown over the years and what have been its success factors?
First of all, thank you for the kind invitation to the organizers, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Esports betting has been around for about 10 years, but in the past 4 or 5 years, the market has grown has really grown, and the product is really expanding on a monthly basis by adding many new titles. Let's say in the beginning when we started offering betting on esports, there were only 3 titles, the most popular ones like Counter-Strike, Dota 2 and League of Legends. Now there are more than 25 games, and the coverage is expanded, as I said, on a monthly basis. One of the reasons why esports betting is a gambling vertical that it's not to be missed is the fact that it's giving this profitable and adequate answer to sportsbook to reach the new audiences that are becoming bettors or the next generation of bettors. And when we think of this audience, we need to know that there are 3 main groups, starting with the so-called millennials, the esports enthusiasts, and people that actually spend their whole time, free time, playing or watching esports and tournaments. Those are the younger generation. And finally, some occasional viewers that tune in for the big events or big games. So this is a really nice audience that has to be attracted on proper way. And we see over the years that if at the beginning esports was a niche vertical in gambling, now it's becoming mainstream, and more betting brands are adding esports as a separate section on their websites.
Interesting phenomenon. Betting on esports, Cédric, you of course have very much also the perspective from the player side, team side. Maybe you can tell us from your experience what you have experienced in terms of betting on that sports activity, being yourself involved as a player.
Yeah, it's interesting to me to listen to all of the panels here, because I'm on the side, you bet on us, and I'm a league operator and a team, so we have both. And I run in Switzerland also leagues, for example, for big consumer brands like the Swiss Car Club has a league with us, or we are running projects for banks, and they don't want to be involved with betting. And so now we are in a situation in the middle where the betting industry at the moment sees esports betting as amazing, because they don't need to ask the publisher for permission, because it's kind of public good, you know, the knowledge of a result is kind of public good. But us as teams and organizers, we need the publisher's permission in everything. And the game publisher is the god in the esports industry that can shut us down with one finger or make us rich with one finger. And it's very easy for them. And so when we are caught between the betting companies that, for example, we have now a situation where one of our leagues is listed on many betting sites, mostly not the big ones, the ones who don't really, maybe a little bit shady, so they are listed on all those sites, but we didn't agree, and now we have a problem with our non-endemic brand being angry, and then being the publisher being angry at us, even though we're in the middle. And don't get me wrong, I like money like all you like money. I would like to participate in betting in theory, but the publishers officially ban often betting, for example, at their tournaments. If you go to a Blizzard Entertainment tournament, you see teams with black tape over their betting sponsors on the event. So that's a huge problem. And so when I talk about regulation, I hope that the betting industry will find solutions with the publishers. Not actually a legal issue of the state, it's more of an issue between those big multi-billion companies where teams and private-owned leagues are completely in the middle, getting focused. And also us as a team, when there is many matches of us being bet on, we are suddenly it looks like we are participating in something that the publisher officially has forbidden to us. But still our logo is there, and even though we have a contract that forbids us to participate in gambling, but our logo is there. It's a strange situation, and we are very reliant on those contracts. And so this is the market where the regulation between those billion-dollar companies for small companies like us is terrible ground to walk around. So, yeah.
Just one additional question in that context, because Switzerland recently passed legislation on gaming, and we briefly looked at the regulator's point of view. How is esports affected by that regulation, and can you tell us a bit about the stance of the regulator of Comlot?
Yeah, exactly. In Switzerland, not a full expert on the new betting regulation, but mainly it's now the landlocked casinos, the international betting sites who do not have partnerships are banned of operating in Switzerland, and there's internet bans coming up. So really, you can really imagine the only websites that are banned in Switzerland is child porn and international betting websites. So this is the level we're talking about, and that's scary to us because now the agency that is responsible for betting regulations suddenly is publishing articles about esports. That's very worrying because if we are getting regulated by them, we are all in big trouble because we obviously, if we are looked at as a betting or as a gambling game, the esports itself, not the betting on esports, that's clear, but the esports itself, then for the market in Switzerland, that's a terrible development, which we are at the moment now figuring out why suddenly the official gambling government agency is the only government agency talking about esports in itself. So this is the development where we're, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely not the agency that esports want to be associated with, right? Oleg, I think in preparing the panel, we've also addressed the role of opinion leaders. So where do you see the role of opinion leaders in the esports ecosystem? Who are they, and what makes them leaders from the perspective of the followers?
Well, I think that opinion leaders are the base which drives the esports towards the general mass audiences. So, and for the brands, it's also, I believe, one of the first steps you can take to enter this community, because so they accumulate all the people that are interested in esports on different levels. So there are streamers who play themselves. They have more, I don't know, more enthusiasts among their fans. So this is more like of an esports audience. But on the other hand, you may build a wider reach if you will, I don't know, maybe have some partnership with YouTube bloggers, which may also be players, but on a lower level, but they do have a large mass audiences. So there are esports fans and there are just gamers. And depending on which audience you would like to affect, so you may vary your strategy and either talk to professional players, which are the opinion leaders, or just to YouTube bloggers, which is more, I don't know, maybe familiar to marketers and how to work with them. Also, it's needed to say that opinion leaders also will examine your brand, whether it fits their interests, whether it fits what they believe in, and if they truly will see the value of your brand to their fans, to themselves, then they will become your ambassadors and truly will affect the opinions of their fans. And the fans, they do closely look at what these opinion leaders do. They follow them not only online in their streams, but also in their lives, what they eat, what they drink, what's their clothing. And all of these brands do matter to the fans. So if your brand you will be able to enter all of this, the life of the opinion leader, then it will enter also the lives of their fans.
Great. Interesting developments in terms of marketing, branding. Lyubomira, what can we expect next? Like in terms of what are the top games that are betting made, how they will further evolve the entire esports world?
We can definitely expect growing and expanding the entire esports ecosystem, which of course includes esports betting. And we will see in the coming years new game titles that enters the betting part of it or are betting made, because now there are those around 30 titles that are betting made, and we actually can offer pre-match and live odds. For example, one of the very popular game right now, like Fortnite, is not so much prepared to be offered in terms of betting to the broad audience of fans and players of this game. But we need to also have in mind that esports is a vast term, and there are many different games like first-person shooters, MOBA games, and sports simulated games like FIFA and NBA 2K, which have really different audiences and really different game specifics. So we are trying to offer the best and be prepared for each changes and updates of the game, so that we stay up to date and offer the best to the end users. Yeah.
Thank you indeed. Oleg, maybe also looking ahead at the future, where do you see the future of esports marketing developing?
I believe there's a small issue about the fact that cyber sports it doesn't divide on countries. It's divided by languages, and so, for example, I don't know, Russian language is the only language for all the area of the former USSR. And for example, if you're a brand from, I don't know, Kazakhstan maybe, you cannot market only targeted at your specific audience in Kazakhstan. So for many local brands, this is a large problem. When you try to enter or to sponsor some opinion leader, it will be probably from Russia. He will be probably from Russia and will have about 80% of Russian audience. So you pay for 80% of Russian audience and maybe for 5% of your local audience in Kazakhstan. So this is really a great deal, and such platforms as Twitch, for example, they don't allow this targeting instrument right now. So I believe the great development in this sphere will be to improve the technology, to improve targeting, and to make it possible to market the esports locally on any of your specific markets. I believe that this would be a great breakthrough.
Thank you very much, Oleg. Let me reach out again to see whether we have questions to our panelists. Yes, please, again, happy to share your question to the panel.
So I'm not very knowledgeable when it comes to esports, but you said something very interesting where you said that the publishers' brains basically flamed out, and you would like rules and regulations, but not the ones specific to, let's say, Switzerland. My question is just because I'm not very knowledgeable in normal sports betting. It's not like Bayern Munich. If you have like someone betting on Bayern Munich, it's not like the club will have an issue with the football federation. Why are the rules different when it comes to esports and betting? Because this is where I cannot really understand why it's different for you guys.
You're right. It's at the moment not. If it's pure betting without sponsorship or something, there is no. If you're a team, there is at the moment no precautions by the publisher. It's just the thing is that we are moving right now in esports from to franchise leagues, like in the North American sports system. It's going over all the world where all the teams are publisher supported, and so the relationship is more business-like than in the FIFA and the UEFA. That is a democratic body where the clubs have something to say also, right? So if all the clubs are okay with something, FIFA's okay with something. Or and in the publishers, there might be different cultures from each publisher that has different opinions. So that kind of drives to a different way it's run. And then on the other side, many of the league operators are private companies. And so basically what is seen at the moment as strange is that the betting companies can use the IP and the products of these companies for free, kind of, which is strange in esports because this is the only this is the only market part of esports that this actually works, where external people can just take what you produce and make money with that. And that on top of multiple IPs, you have the IP of the publisher, that's, this sport is owned by somebody, right? And then on top of that, you have the IP of the tournament producers that own that tournament. And on top of that, you have the IP of the team that owns that team. And on top of that, you have the IP of the single influencers and players that own their brand. And then comes someone outside, betting companies, and they make last year, I think, $8 billion in betting turnover on all of that, right? And the funny thing is, this side here is not profitable at the moment. So this is where a strange dynamic comes in the market, where people are unhappy with the situation, where there is just used. And the publishers then try to use their influence to at least forbid all sponsorships, for example. And that limits the money flow that should come back. Normally in many sports, money flows back from betting to the teams somehow, like through sponsorships, marketing campaigns, digital ads, blah, 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 etc. And in esports now, publishers are shutting that down very effectively by just saying no, and that's it. And that means that the money flow back from this side to that side is stopped. But this side still makes money. So that is a strange, it's a strange dynamic in the market. You understand what I mean? That's kind of where we come from.
Thank you, Cédric. So we have definitely identified one major challenge to the industry. I think we'll come back to that notion in a second. Just want to check again whether we have further questions from the audience. Yes, please.
Hi, Tiago from All In Global. We have been sponsoring two esports teams, one last year, one this year. One of them was a Pro Evolution Soccer team, another one is an Overwatch team. In both of the agreements with both of the developers, we've had issues with gambling association. So we can get away with it because we are service providers to the industry, but we have seen some blockages there. So do you think the esports industry is moving towards accepting gambling more and more, and we're going to have like a huge esports betting boom over the next few years? Or do you still think a lot of the publishers, a lot of the developers will put this type of obstacles and they don't want to be associated with gambling? It's also interesting because Konami develops Pro Evolution Soccer, but they also develop slot machines, and they did warn us that they didn't want any sort of connection with gambling.
Konami, of course, being a large international company. So maybe Lyubomira first.
Yeah, sure. That's a really interesting and again serious question, because I believe that we're at the beginning of developing this path of regulation, of organization under one thing that can actually say this is okay, this is not okay in terms of regulation, as in other sports, as in other betting verticals. But I think that esports betting is actually doing great work over those years, because it is developing the entire esports ecosystem, and those brands that are entering the esports by sponsoring some teams are doing great favor of the entire ecosystem, like more tournaments are organized and more opportunities are given for the players to feel this ultimate betting entertainment, as I can say. It is giving something new to the players that they can actually use their knowledge on the teams or on the tournaments and bet on them. We definitely need to discuss in which regions we try to sponsor those tournaments and why this is happening. But as far as I know, there are many organizations that are trying to put the framework in order for esports betting, the betting side of it, to work, and the other side of it, the esports itself, to be somehow put in a working framework.
Thank you. Cédric, short comment on your side?
Yeah, so I think really it depends on the relationship of the future between publisher and the betting industry. The same way would depend on betting industry and government. it's funny because if you look at skin gambling, Valve software successfully ceased and desist, ordered cease and desist against those websites, even though they were doing kind of the same as everybody else, but they were using a little bit more of their IP than normal. So that was enough for them to go in front of court and globally shut it down. So if we go in war, if betting industry goes to war with the publishers, I think the betting industry will lose in the long term. And if the publishers can agree somehow with the betting industry, maybe with a lot of regulations like towards child protection, youth protection, all that stuff, then I think it's gonna go very big because gamers are gamblers at the same time. So yeah, I think that's gonna be.
So Cédric, you identified a major challenge earlier in the discussion. Do you see other major challenges for the esports community, maybe not least also from a players' team perspective?
Yeah, I mean, looking to the big franchise league and profitability, that's for sure a big challenge. Just last week, I think the founder of H2K, that's one of the biggest international esports teams that ever existed, has come public with numbers of his League of Legends franchise team, where he showed that he's actually operating on a $1 million loss, even though he's one of the big franchise teams, and at the moment we are on a pure investor-based global esports. So we have a problem between the publishers being extremely profitable and then the esports industry at the moment not being profitable. So there needs to be a model, or we're going to develop ourselves into the football-style situation where everything is just founded by rich hobbyists that somehow invest billions of dollars. That's one way that we don't want to go. We at the base don't want to go that way. We would like to have a normal, profitable industry, and for that we're going to have to see how the profitability develops.
I believe in pre-discussions we also mentioned the example of France in the context that when we look at the negotiation power between the leagues and the esports players, it's pretty clear who has the negotiation power on their side. Can you shortly comment on the French approach of trying to address this issue?
Yeah, so the French have tried to, they basically have united the esports federation with the game developer and game publisher federation. So the government has actually almost forced that deal. So they have really orchestrated that they go together, and now there's actually a huge federation with a player council, organization council, a publisher developer council, an indie developer council, and the tournament league council that all have a veto right in that organization, which of course now sounds extremely complicated, and it is, and I'm not sure how well it really works day-to-day basis. But you can see there the way to a more democratic and a more regulated market between the different players. And what is important to say here, I'm in Switzerland also discussing directly with Swiss Olympics and directly with the government as an expert. And to become Olympic, esports will need democratic standards. If we want to be Olympic, that's a different question. But if we want to be Olympic, there will have to be democratic foundation, otherwise we will never be Olympic. And this then again goes back to the publisher, where there is $1 billion interests against democratic interests, and we go into the same circle that I talked about again. So I think there's a lot of decision making there to be done. Which direction do we really want to go with the sports itself?
Thank you very much. Let's see whether we have one more question, maybe from the floor. Yes, please. Robert. 1 second. Oh, we might hear you.
We don't want to be funded by the billionaire superstars that buy football clubs. But the industry has to grow. And the industry has to grow because we're making money, the leagues have to get bigger. Do you see maybe a situation where you get the tournament itself or the fairness of the tournaments starting to be regulated? And do you see this affecting the actual way of how your opinion leaders will take over and promote this? Because now it's becoming a regulated sport.
You mean regulated by a federation or
by
something?
A federation, let's say, so for example, FIFA regulate football, they make sure that the outcome of the game is fair, which then allows regulators to say the outcome of the game is fair, and there's no collusion that's happening, so...
Well, we see start of that, and locally that already exists in the DACH market, for example, where in Switzerland and Austria especially, every referee of the big tournament organizers have together in a federation, and every referee has to be certified referee by this federation. That's outside of the publisher's restrictions, because the publisher is too big to care about that, and so the locals are building that up. But the question is if internationally this will be managed to do is the same question with Olympics. I think the only guys who will...
But one additional to it is you are still playing your game on software.
Yeah, of course.
And now the software is owned by the publisher, but the publisher doesn't guarantee, let's use a holistic word, the fairness of the outcome of the game, because he's not regulated to make you. You understand where I'm?
Well, now it depends what you mean.
It's a bit
if you mean fair in terms of the game itself is fair, that's just like,
that's the platform which you're playing.
Yes, but I think the game itself is just what it is, and I think that's something where esports will always be special because it's created by a developer, right? So we will just assume if everybody agrees to play that game, that means it's fair, you know.
If the numbers become big, I'm saying.
If on top of that we talk about like technical cheating, about fairness in terms of match fixing, where by the way, just a month ago, 6 people in Australia have been arrested by the police and charged with up to 10 years prison for match fixing in esports. So this is becoming from this fairness should be regulated by local federations in our belief, because we don't believe that the global corporate will ever realistically regulate that. So this should be regulated by national federations and then international federations overviewing that. In terms of content of the game, I think we will always live with the situation where there is one guy, and in many companies it's one guy. For example, in Dota 2, he's called Ice Frog, that's his nickname. This guy balances the game. He decides if it's fair or not, the game itself. So
you just opened up Pandora's box.
Exactly.
Here, it's one guy.
Yes. So in that
Simon's looking with weird eyes.
Yeah, but
from a legal perspective, Simon, what would you?
No, that would be a long follow-up on this. I think the opening a very interesting.
Because that is my argument. Because there is, so betting and sponsorships and everything. Okay, so from I'm not a regulator, I'm not a salesperson, but obviously you hear what regulators say and how they ask us to make sure every game is certified, all the software is certified. From a slots provider, you have to make sure your certification over 30 million rounds is giving a 97% payout. So from a platform perspective, one guy is assessing the fairness of that game. Who regulates that one guy?
But the thing is that the game itself is played, right? And every player has the same situation. So there is no bank that wins. So it's either this player or that player that wins. And I have one big example. It's from the international in Dota, where in the final, the Ukrainian team, Navi, played against the Chinese team. And one of the players of Navi used a bug, kind of. But it was not really a bug. It was just a very strange situation to win a game that was impossible to win otherwise. And then they won over $1 million. And this was a huge discussion. And was this bug use fair or not? And even the Chinese team agreed it was in the game. We could have done the same. So it's fair. Like that's what eSport at the moment believes strongly. And I think for the next decades, this will not change quickly. So the belief is if it's in the game, and since there is no bank, it's just a player that's going to profit from a bug that exists for both in theory. So that is kind of fair, right? If it's wrong for both, that's okay, right? So that's the situation.
I think we will carry this conversation to the break afterwards. I just want to be sure that to check whether Oleg or Lyubomira would like to add something on a final note.
It's a broader discussion, very interesting question actually. We can discuss afterwards if you're interested in the game, how one guy thinks of this game and why it is fair actually, but we can discuss it afterwards.
And also I would like to add that if there is some high level regulation that will, I don't know, push some, I know, extremely tough or strict laws or regulations, this may, I know, turn the game into something boring for the audience. So currently, all this ecosystem it just regulates itself, well, fairly. Yeah. Okay. Then we'll have the discussion maybe later. Okay.
I'm very happy to see such an animated debate, and please join me in thanking Lyubomira, Oleg, and Cédric.